Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espy.
Fastamai, good evening. How are you? Welcome to Update, your daily news roundup where you can catch up quickly with everything that's been happening on the Isle of Man today. Coming up before 5:30, we're going to hear about the electricity issues that have been affecting people in Santon over the past few weeks. We'll also hear the latest from the ongoing tribunal ruling on a dispute between Crogga and one of its founding members. And we'll hear from the free feline himself, Thomas the cat in Ramsey. All right, maybe not directly from him, but we'll also keep an eye on the weather, the traffic and travel as well. And if you'd like to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. You can text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. Let's join Chanel first of all for a roundup of today's main news headlines. Fastamai, Chanel.
Fastamai. Manx Utilities is investigating recurring power outages in Santon caused by a rare transient fault that self-repairs, making it hard to locate. Outages since mid-November have affected up to 500 customers, with the fault linked to colder weather. Manx Utilities has apologised, warning further disruption is possible as investigations continue. A tribunal to rule on a dispute between Crogga and one of its founding members over an alleged unlawful deduction of pay has gone into its second day. Dickon Sargent left his position as director and CEO of the company in March 2022, but remains a shareholder. Representatives from Crogga gave their evidence to the tribunal today, and closing statements are expected to be heard tomorrow. And around 3,000 people on the Isle of Man have been impacted by a delay in rolling out of the shingles vaccine. It's not yet clear how the vaccine program, which it's hoped will be restarted in January next year, will be funded in the long term.
Does that mean that funding is also going to be provided for Manx Care to continue the shingles program?
In international news, the UK will train and support Lebanese troops to help maintain the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The Foreign Secretary told a committee of MPs the British Army stands by Beirut as the pause in fighting takes effect. 2 people have been charged with assault after a baby was found unresponsive at a house on the Wirral. Police were called to the Seacombe area on Sunday afternoon. And Harlequins prop Joe Marler is going to retire from rugby union this week. The 34-year-old former England international will quit the sport after his club's fixture against Bristol on Friday night. Those are your headlines. News at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Chanel. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Not too bad tonight, mainly dry, clear spells, light winds. Temperatures, though, will fall as low as 2 Celsius, so again the risk of a slight frost. And a chilly start to the day tomorrow, clear or sunny spells, but it will turn cloudy in the afternoon and there might be some light or patchy rain developing at times. A moderate to fresh east or southeast wind that will soon strengthen tomorrow. Top temperatures will be around 10 Celsius. And just looking ahead to Friday, generally cloudy again, some light rain possibly later in the day, and again quite windy. There'll be a strong southeast wind. Sunset this evening was at 2 minutes past 4. Sunrise tomorrow morning will be at 10 past 8.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
SMS Trading have moved to 3 St Paul's Square, Ramsey. For flat pack to fully built, new or second-hand furniture, SMS Trading offer all-island delivery and man-in-a-van service. Call 315151 or find SMS Trading on Facebook.
See the island like you've never seen it before on an incredible chauffeur-driven trike tour. A unique way to make memories that will last a lifetime. Gift vouchers available too. See iomtriketours.com for details and booking.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Beldorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company. Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
If you run a small business or just need more room in the back, Philshaw Vehicles has the perfect van or light commercial for all your needs and can sort out any finance. Based in the Tremode estate, view philshawvehicles.im or call 49 51 49.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio FM. It's just coming up to 5:05. Now, we heard Chanel mention those ongoing power disruptions in the Santon area, and it seems like residents there have been having a pretty rough time over the past couple of weeks. To find out more details about that, we're joined now by Christian. Christian, first, can you just give us an overview of what's been happening?
Yeah, well, it's, like you say, been a frustrating period for many in Santon. The area is dealing with what's called a transient fault on the electricity network, and that's quite a rare issue where the fault can temporarily fix itself, and naturally that makes it very difficult for engineers to locate and resolve the problem.
And how does it affect the residents?
The fault has caused repeated power outages over the last couple of weeks. There have been 6 notable incidents. I'll just break those down quickly. On the 10th and 11th of November, an 11,000 volt power cable failed near the Energy from Waste plant, leaving 500 customers without power. Most had their supply restored within 90 minutes after the faulty section was replaced. Then on the 20th, the protection equipment at a substation was activated by the transient fault, cutting power to another 500 customers for 3 to 4 hours. The next day it happens again, affecting the same number of people, but this time for around an hour and a half.
And did engineers think they'd actually solve the issue at that point?
They did. After those events, the line patrols identified and replaced a broken insulator, which was believed to be the culprit. Unfortunately, though, that wasn't the end of it. Just a day later, on the 22nd of November, the transient fault reoccurred again, cutting power to 500 customers for about an hour. Since then, engineers have been working to reduce the impact by reconfiguring the 11,000 volt network.
But even with those measures, it seems that we're hearing the problem hasn't actually gone away.
Yes, exactly. The fault struck again on the 26th and the 27th of November, but this time it affected fewer customers, around 250, for roughly an hour and around an hour each. The cold weather is suspected to be playing a role, with temperatures dipping close to freezing.
So what is actually being done to fix this issue?
Well, teams are actively working to trace and repair the fault. Once they pinpoint the issue, they'll be able to take action to fix it. But in the meantime, they've reconfigured the network again to minimise the number of customers that are being impacted.
And as we know from what you've just said, Christian, it sounds like an incredibly difficult problem to solve. Has the company said anything to reassure residents there?
Yes, they have apologised to those affected and emphasised that this type of fault is extremely rare. They go on to say they're committed to resolving it and promise to provide further updates as soon as they can identify the root cause.
Thank you very much indeed, Christian, and let's do hope that issue is resolved soon for everyone in Santon. 7.5 minutes past 5.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Now, a tribunal to rule on a dispute between Crogga and one of its founding members over an alleged unlawful deduction of pay has gone into its second day. Dickon Sargent left his position as director and CEO of the company in March 2022, but remains a shareholder. Well, Amy Griffiths was at the tribunal for Manx Radio today. Just remind us first, Amy, what this dispute is all about.
Well, it comes from a decision for various directors to defer their salaries at a time when Crogga was in acute financial distress in the autumn of 2020. Mr. Sargent was one of a number to have agreed to do this. The understanding of this deferral was that when the company had successfully secured funding, it would be repaid with an added 15% on top of that. It wasn't just directors who agreed to this. A number of suppliers also agreed to defer their invoices too. Mr. Sargent claims he should have been repaid at the next funding round. However, Crogga claims he wasn't due to be repaid until £10 million was raised for a 3D seismic survey, which was due to be completed of the seabed off Mackald to see whether the area could be drilled for gas.
So what happened in the tribunal today then?
Well, representatives for Crogga gave evidence to the tribunal, John Lovelady and Mark Pearce. Mr. Lovelady was a director at the time, but has since resigned his position. He remains a shareholder. Mark Pearce was a non-executive director at the time of the discussions, although stepped up to be acting CEO when Mr. Sargent resigned. He is also a shareholder. Today they were both cross-examined by Mr. Sargent's legal representative, Christopher Webb.
And what were the main points covered in that?
So the focus of that cross-examination was the witness's interpretation of the phrase next funding round. Mr Lovelady said he was always of the understanding that all debts accrued by the company from both suppliers and deferral of salaries were to be repaid on the completion of EQ1 funding. Now, that's the scheme that was meant to raise the £10 million for the seismic survey. He told the tribunal that minutes from various board meetings confirmed this, as all discussions around deferred payments were made under the heading of EQ1 funding. However, Mr Webb disputed this, putting it to Mr Lovelady that the EQ1 funding had been completed in May 2019, when an initial round of fundraising had gathered around £2 million of the total £12 million that was needed for the whole project. He argued that any subsequent money raised was for a new funding scheme called EQ1S, which focused specifically on Phase B of Crogga's plans, the seismic survey. Mr Lovelady disagreed with that assessment. He claimed it was clear to everyone that EQ1 fundraising hadn't been completed, which was proven when it was still an item for discussion in various board meetings over a year later in the autumn of 2020.
And Amy, was that something that Mark Pearce backed up?
It was, yes. He claims that in October 2020, when the salary deferrals were first discussed, he, as non-executive director, and the rest of the board were led to believe by Crogga's deal team, Mr Sargent and Eric Evanson, that a deal was imminent which would cover the full £10 million needed. This was supported by minutes from a board meeting suggesting it was likely that that seismic survey could be carried out in Q1 of 2021, subject to that funding. Mr Pearce said for that to happen, they would have needed to have the funds within days or weeks. That investment, however, fell through. Mr Pearce said he'd also deferred his salary during this period and was of the understanding it would be repaid in full with a 15% uplift upon successful completion of the EQ1 funding, not the next funding round. While a draft email was shown at the tribunal which did stipulate repayment to those who deferred their salaries would be made on completion of EQ1, the email that was actually signed by all interested parties said repayment was due at the next funding round. Mr Sargent's representative stipulated that was in May 2022, when Crogga raised £800,000 of capital by selling some of its shares at a reduced price of £1, and that all parties should have been repaid at that point. Mr Pearce disagreed, though, stating that funding round was an emergency measure and was needed to keep the company afloat. He says it was not part of any funding specifically for the seismic survey. When asked why that draft email that he also signed was changed, Mr Pearce claimed it was because the person who drew it up is clearly not good at drafting, adding it was great to have hindsight now, but they didn't have it at the time.
So a lot to take in there, Amy. What's going to happen next?
The tribunal is expected to hear its closing statements tomorrow morning, and then a final decision will be made at a later date.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy. As I say, a lot of detail there. Don't worry if you didn't get it all. You can go to manxradio.com and read it in full. 12 minutes past 5. Now, the new infrastructure minister has told us she was surprised to be offered the job. Dr Michelle Hayward was elevated to the Council of Ministers following a political reshuffle by the Chief Minister Alfred Cannon. The Russian MHK was elected in 2021 and this represents her first ministerial posting. John Moss asked if she'd had to take some time before accepting the position.
I did. I considered it for a while, but it's good for me to develop as a politician and to take a greater responsibility. I hope I can bring something to the department in terms of oversight and perspective and guidance.
You're the member actually who's famously put daffodils in potholes. Is that going to be top of your list?
Certainly from a constituency perspective, I've been championing the poor quality of the high street and wanting to get the scheme moving there. It's tied up at the moment in the fact that there's coal tar waste under the road. And so actually what I need to do is a piece of work with DEFA to work out what do we do with coal tar waste. And that actually unlocks about 15 different projects around the island. So I am working on that and I've already had discussions with the DEFA minister and we're looking forward to getting together and trying to unlock that problem.
You're going to have to get used to being stopped in the street all the time.
Yes, I know.
Has it happened yet?
No, but my email inbox filled up rapidly as of yesterday morning when the announcement was made. So anyone who's emailed me in the last 24 hours, I will get back to you. Eventually I'm working through the list and I'm working with support in the department to actually do something to manage that.
Now, not long after that cabinet reshuffle, Dr Hayward being appointed, now as we know, as the DOI Minister, the Middle MHK Stu Peters resigned from his role within that department. He'd been a political member there since 2022, but says the new minister needs to be able to choose her own team. And interestingly, in a discussion on Manx forums, Mr Peters said he'd also ruled himself out of joining Comin as he hates going to meetings. Here's John again.
I think that the new minister and I have probably got fairly different political views, which would almost inevitably come into conflict. I also think that the new minister should have the right to immediately set up her own team of people. So it struck me as being the honourable thing to do to resign from DOI.
Well, you say in your email, and this will have caught people's eye, you don't like meetings. Isn't that what being an MHK is all about?
No, I hate meetings. I've always hated meetings.
But your constituents feel shortchanged that their MHK doesn't like meetings and sits down in a meeting thinking, I'd rather I wasn't here.
Well, John, I remember back at in the days at Manx Radio, meetings just become interminable talking shops. I'm an active sort of person. I like to get things done rather than talk about getting things done.
But isn't it how business is done as an MHK?
Sadly, it is, and one has to go through that process. Doesn't mean to say that you've got to like it.
Do you feel that you are still a fully fledged MHK, or do you feel you might have to resign once you made this statement?
That's an awful stretch. No, I don't think I'll have to resign.
You feel happy enough? You feel you're doing a job for your constituents?
Absolutely, yeah. And let's not forget that the job of an MHK is to represent their constituents primarily. The work of government comes on top of that.
That is the Middle MHK meeting-hating Stu Peters talking to John there. And responding to those comments, Dr Hayward, the DOI Minister, wished Mr Peters well, adding, unfortunately, meetings are a major part of the job and a critical part of developing good governance around decision-making. Meanwhile, responding to comments from the Onken MHK Rob Callister, who said he, like Mr Peters, wouldn't have hung around, Dr Hayward said, "Given the history between us, Mr Callister can rest assured I won't be asking him to join my team."
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, nothing on the police pages, but we understand there are long tailbacks on the old Castletown Road back to the nunnery, and we believe that is because of a broken down van. So if you're travelling in that direction, maybe you want to steer somewhere else at the moment, but do let us know if you see anything else while you're out and about, 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. Other than that, all looking good down at the airport and at the steam packet as well. The Manxman is due into Douglas at around about 6:15, heading out for Heysham again at 7:45.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at
Quayside.
It's 5:17 Medical professionals are facing a constant battle to try and reduce the stigma around sexual health. Now, earlier this month, the new Manx Integrated Sexual Health Centre, or MISH, relocated to a new home on Kensington Road in Douglas to meet the ever-growing demands on the service. At that time, another media outlet, not Manx Radio, on the island, was criticised for how it reported the move after initially choosing to use what many people saw as an inappropriate headline. Well, Lewis went to MISH to speak to lead nurse Amanda Dawson.
The move went very well, actually. It's been a lot of hard work. The staff have worked extremely hard to make sure that we move from one place to another without too much trauma and without too much disruption to our services. We worked really hard in our old clinic before we opened our new clinic. The new clinic gives us more clinical rooms, which was one of the drivers for moving. So anybody who wants to get an appointment here knows that they might have to wait a few weeks for an appointment. We're hoping in the very near future that our new clinic rooms will address that. So more rooms means we can see more patients. And we think it's a more convenient location for most people to get to, with parking outside. So we're hoping it's going to be a much more accessible service.
What can put people off coming to the clinic?
I think the clinic for a long time has had stigma, and we've worked so hard to get rid of that stigma, encourage people to look after their sexual health, and it's not been helped by recent headlines. I was really encouraged by the public response to what may be considered completely irresponsible journalism. It really had such an impact on staff here who'd worked so hard. It was really unfair.
It's important, of course, that people feel they can come forward without judgment. Is that a constant battle?
It is a constant battle, one that we think we're winning, obviously judging by the public response to the recent headlines, and also by feedback from our patients. Once they come in and they meet the staff and they get the service, we get such good feedback, and they always say that was never as bad as I thought. We would always say to people, never be scared to come in and get checked.
That is the lead nurse for Integrated Sexual Health Services, Amanda Dawson, talking to Lewis. And you can find more information and the full interview with Amanda over at manxradio.com. We have those newscasts there because obviously we can't play the whole interview on air, but it's important for you to be able to hear everything that was said in that quite detailed conversation. It's coming up to 5:20. Assisted dying legislation on the Isle of Man could be derailed by existing anti-discrimination laws. Now, this is the belief of a Christian campaigner who says he believes it would be open to continual challenge. This week, as we heard yesterday, the Assisted Dying Bill returned to the Legislative Council for the second evidence stage. But Peter Murcott told Manx Radio on Man in Line he foresees issues.
What I believe the legal opinion is saying is that if you provide an assisted suicide service, and I'm giving it its correct legal name as opposed to the other name that's the popular one that's put about, then if you put a lot of restrictions on that, which of course all the safeguards would, or some of them would put restrictions, they've got to have terminal illness, they've got to be this, that and the other, then it's quite conceivable that the discriminatory challenge would run like this. Well, we fall into another status. We haven't got a terminal illness that's going to take effect within 1 year, but we just quite frankly, as is coming before, I believe before Holland, where they're sort of talking about whether persons over 75 could just sort of decide that they'd had enough of life, and that's it, they'd like to go, then quite frankly, someone quite conceivably could take a case and it could go all the way through the courts. If you don't pass a bill in the first place, then you can't be charged with discrimination because you can't discriminate in terms of a law that doesn't exist. And that is a very powerful, cogent argument. Where everyone's coming from is don't go down this road, because if you don't go down it, then whatever challenge is brought against legislation in other countries cannot affect you because you haven't got that law. But once you've got that law, then you are open to the effects of whatever the European Court might determine. And so my final word on this subject is really be warned, be warned, be warned.
That was Peter Murcott speaking on Man in Line about the assisted dying legislation, which is due to return to LegCo for the clauses stage on the 17th of December. A Ramsey commissioner says she hopes Thomas the cat's new status is going to really encourage people to visit the town. Sandra Cottam-Shea, who organised a ceremony for the cat, said people came from Port Erin to see Thomas become a free feline. Our local democracy reporter Emma Draper has been talking to her and also chair of the board Rob Cowell about Thomas's ceremony.
It's a season of a bit of fun, isn't it? Christmas is all about joy and celebration, and if we warm our heart or raise a smile, which we definitely have done today in that boardroom, that's a good job done.
Is there a cost to this to the ratepayer?
Categorically no cost at all. The collar, it looks about £1 worth, and if there is a challenge, I will pay it myself.
It's lovely, isn't it? I'm surprised at the amount of people that turned up and how well behaved Thomas was. He was born for this.
There were a few rumours at the beginning that he might be a little bit agitated or a little bit scared, but he's behaved really, really well.
He's owning that mayoral collar and he's developed an even stronger swagger.
And how do you think this might help the residents and the businesses of the town in the future?
Well, it's Christmas, and Christmas is a time for sharing, giving, caring, looking after each other. I hope that's brought an element to the town. Curiosity for Thomas, increased footfall, but generally in the community, just to be kind and nice to each other. If we're looking out for Thomas, we're talking and looking out for each other.
And how important is he for people?
He's a great feel-good factor. People bob into shops looking for him. I spoke to Dawning Copycat yesterday and she said that somebody had driven over from Port Erin just to see him, which is really sweet. Yes, it's daft, it's ridiculous, it's nonsense, it's unicorns and everything that goes with it, but it's Christmas, and if it does some good and gets us talking with each other, then there's no harm in that.
Ramsey Commissioner Sandra Cottam-Shea talking about Thomas the cat, who now has feline status in Ramsey. There's a lovely video of Thomas actually on our Facebook page and also on the web story as well. Go and have a look. He looks amazing. He's got his little collar, his little chain. He's got some special merchandise as well. He didn't want to speak to us though. Not quite sure why. 5:25, time for the sports news now with Darren Timpson. Good evening, Darren.
Good evening. The Isle of Man's traditional sport is set to be celebrated on the 2024 Christmas £2 coin this year. Camang is similar to hurling and shinty in other Celtic nations and was the island's national sport until the early 20th century when football found its way to Manx shores. The sport was played during the festive season and traditionally on Boxing Day, and it is being recognised this year by featuring on the Christmas £2 coin. The coin is available to buy from the Isle of Man post office. Next, looking towards the end of the week, a Manx boxer is preparing for his next fight. Sam Rennie is set to take part in the Thunderdome 48 in Northbridge, Australia on Friday. Rennie was a member of New Horizon Boxing Club on the island but moved to Australia where he made his professional debut in March this year. The boxer won his first pro bout earlier this year and will be hoping to get a second win on Friday.
Thank you very much indeed, Darren. Just a reminder, as you're heading home, we understand there are long tailbacks on the old Castletown Road. This is going back to the nunnery, or it certainly was a few minutes ago, and it's because of a broken down van, we believe, in that area. So if you're thinking about going that way home, maybe think about taking a different route. And as ever, if you do spot something when you're out and about, we'd love to hear from you, 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. But that is all from Update this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Once again, go to the Manx Radio website for details on all our top stories. Or if you fancy having a chat about some of the things, some of the stories that maybe you're thinking about, then you can go to our social media pages and you can check out that video of Thomas the cat if you haven't already. We also have Man in Line coming back tomorrow lunchtime, and you can leave a message ahead of time. 682 631 is our out of hours number. That could be a message that can be played out on the show. Do stay with Manx Radio this evening. Coming up next, it's Spotlight with Howard Kane. Then Chris Kinley will be here from 6 p.m. with Greatest Hits. Ernie Thorne's here from 9 with the Opera Hour. And then it's Rianne with After Hours from 10 p.m. Just rounding off your Wednesday evening. Have a great one, whatever you're doing. We'll be back with you on Update from 5 p.m. tomorrow.